Alright, so I watched another episode of Star Trek Discovery. This one called An Obol for Charon. And that's probably very appropriate because this show is dead on arrival, and you really are going to need a coin to pay the ferryman to get yourself to the realm of the dead. Yeah. This one wasn't as bad as the last one, which was really horrible. But this one, some things that are reminiscent of an actual Star Trek episode. You know, again, continuing on with Tilly and her parasite. That you learn a few more things, but it doesn't matter. It's trying to make contact, and then there's another entity that they run into that's trying to make contact, and so you got the two, going on. Meanwhile, apparently this activates a death spiral for Saru, and he said, well, this is what happens, and so I'm just going to die. And it's going to happen. But he's able to figure out what this strange entity they encounter in space is. They come upon it, and it stops the ship and sort of holds it there and infiltrates the ship's computer systems, and they figure, oh, we're being attacked with a virus, and it screws up their universal translator to where they can't understand each other. It's kind of like the Tower of Babel. And, Saru's able to figure it out because, well, he can understand all these languages because he knows, what did he say, like 90 of them or something like that, and is able to fix the problem. But meanwhile, there's still computer failure and whatnot throughout the ship. And so they deal with that, and then you have this scene with Tilly and Stamets, which would have gone a lot better if it was just the two of them. But then Tig Notaro returns. Yes, what's the name is Jet something. It doesn't matter. Tig Notaro cannot act. I know it's a terrible thing that Louis C.K. stole her idea for her short film, and add insult to injuries, he did it better than she did. But yeah, he shouldn't have stole it. But I don't know what part she can play, but she can't play this one, and it's like walking through mud with her scenes. It's just awful. And no. Look, just have Stamets be the engineer. That's good enough. And so he makes contact with the entity, and its problem is with him because he was the one dealing with the spore drive, and this is the spore, blah, blah, blah. So that'll continue next episode as Tilly is once again stuck. Now she's inside the entity rather than the other way around. Something like that. Meanwhile, of course, the search for Spock continues, and we finally get to see number one. Yes, Rebecca Romaine is in the role, and she beams on board, and if you blink, you missed her. So, she showed up to eat a hamburger and then leave, and that's it. Eventually they'll get to Spock, but they probably should have done that by now, but they're dragging it out as they continue the search for Spock. It wasn't that great. Tig Notaro really brought the show down. Some of the elements of the plot were very stupid. There's a scene where they realize that the entity is not trying to attack them, but rather it's there to die. It's really old, and it wants to leave behind all its knowledge in their computers, which it does. And Saru figures it out, and because he's kind of running parallel with it, because he tells Burnham, says, hey, I want you to take my my personal logs and all that, because that'll be my legacy. And so you kind of have the same situation. Well, you do. You have the same situation going between the two. So they have to explain this to Pike, and Pike says, yeah, all right, we'll take the risk and drop the shields and try to receive the data. Of course, Burnham has to explain this to him. She has to explain to him that this will be a great scientific achievement to get the knowledge of this ancient entity, and this is what a science vessel like Discovery is all about. Yes, the starship captain had to be told this. They just don't know how to do these scenes. And but also that's not what the first season demonstrated, did it? No, Discovery was a secret weapon to be used against the Klingons because of its ability to use a spore drive. Oh, boy. So, a spore drive, the concept of which, of course, they stole from a video game designer. But that's another story. it's a surprise, surprise. Saru doesn't die. It turns out that his belief and his people's belief that they die when they get these symptoms and their little thingies behind the ears swell up and they have to cut them off and he dies. And instead it fell off on its own. And Burnham, he was getting Burnham to cut him off, and she's like, "What the hell just happened?" And he's like, "I don't know." And he realizes, oh my God, they've all been sort of programmed to commit suicide in this condition, and it was all a lie. And yeah, it just goes to prove that their entire species are a bunch of idiots. But it might be that the species that was hunting them or what have you might have programmed them to be this way, kind of similar to how the Jim Hadar ended up under the Dominion. Where they just made them addicted to a drug or what have you, but this could be far more extensive and down to their genetic core. But if they have the time to get back to that, I don't know. I'm thinking this show surely will get the axe. It looks really expensive to make, and it's terrible. And oh boy. So this one, star and a half, I guess. Again, it does look, of course, the special effects is the best any sci-fi show's ever had. I like the music too. The music's pretty good. The theme song's all right. The worst theme song for a Star Trek series was the one for Enterprise, that beer commercial music. No, that was no good. No, don't have rock songs and country songs as your theme music for Star Trek. We don't want any of that. But and the scenes of Pike in #1, well, it's nice, but it's another reminder of, boy, I wish they had done a Pike series instead. So, yeah, not going to get that. Because I figure if the show was to be picked up, I don't think Pike or any of that, or even Spock, would be a part of the next season. So, there you go. Another pretty bad, but not as bad as the last one. That was pretty nasty. And not so much of Michael Burnham being the most amazing person in the universe, but just kind of, sort of. So, and she wasn't really all that part of the episode. It was more of an ensemble episode, again, like Star Trek should be. So, little improvements. Oh, damn, I almost forgot this. And so the episode starts off where they're explaining the problems the Enterprise is having. And Pike says, well, the holograms is just too much trouble for the system, and it needs to be gutted and just replaced with monitor screens. That's their explanation for why the Enterprise looks the way it does, and then this technology is never used again. I think I read somewhere that there was a prequel novelization written for Star Trek Discovery, and the author immediately set about to try to explain how everything looked and whatnot, whereas the TV series never did. And one of the things that he offered was that in some distances, when you're getting away from Starfleet space and what have you, it becomes more difficult to do the holograms. The signal doesn't travel as strong, and it just doesn't work, and eventually it just gets abandoned because it was just more of an aesthetic anyway. That would go a lot longer had they just realized it, but nobody involved with the show apparently read the novelization that they hired this guy to do. So it's a roundabout way they throw this around and say, see, we're fixing the massive aircraft carrier-sized holes within the continuity that Star Trek Discovery created. And no, not quite. It's impossible to do, barring some kind of weird time warp thing or something like that. So anyway, so that's they tossed that in there, but yeah, not good enough. So thank you for watching and listening. Why not subscribe? We'll do it again. And while you're here, check out the link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Bye-bye.